Tonality is a musical system that arranges pitches or chords to induce a hierarchy of perceived relations, stabilities, and attractions. The pitch or triadic chord with the greatest stability is called the tonic. The most common use of the term is to designate the arrangement of musical phenomena around a referential tonic in European music from about 1600 to about 1910 inches. Modern classical music may practice or avoid any sort of tonality, but harmony in popular music remains tonal in some sense, and harmony in jazz music includes many, if not all, tonal characteristics, while having different properties from common practice classical music. All harmonic idioms in popular music are tonal, and none is without function. Tonality is an organized system of tones in which one tone becomes the central point for the remaining tones. In tonality, the tonic is the tone of complete relaxation, the target toward which other tones lead. Tonal music is music that is unified and dimensional. Music is unified if it is exhaustively referable to a pre-compositional system generated by a single constructive principle derived from a basic scale type. It is dimensional if it can nonetheless be distinguished from that pre-compositional ordering. The term tonality copyright originated with Alexander Permelshon-Koren and was borrowed by Franz Sectionnoir Joseph R. Copyrightus in 1840. According to Karl Dahlhaus, however, the term tonality copyright was only coined by Castel Blaze in 1821. Although Farr Copyrightus used it as a general term for a system of musical organization and spoke of types de tonality copyrightus rather than a single system, today the term is most often used to refer to major-minor tonality, the system of musical organization of the common practice period. Major-minor tonality is also called harmonic tonality, diatonic tonality, common practice tonality, functional tonality, or just tonality. Characteristics and features: at least 8 distinct senses of the word tonality, some mutually exclusive, have been identified. The systematic organization of pitch phenomena in any music at all, including pre-17th century Western music as well as much non-Western music, such as music based on the Slendro and Pilog pitch collections of Indonesian gamelan, or employing the modal nuclei of the Arabic maqam or the Indian raga system. This sense also applies to the tonic subdominant harmonic constellations in the theories of Jean-Philippe Rameau as well as the 144 basic transformations of 12-tone technique. By the middle of the 20th century, it had become evident that triadic structure does not necessarily generate a tone center, that non-triadic harmonic formations may be made to function as referential elements, and that the assumption of a 12-tone complex does not preclude the existence of tone centers. For the composer and theorist George Pearl, tonality is not a matter of tone-centeredness, whether based on a natural hierarchy of pitches derived from the overtone series or an artificial pre-compositional ordering of the pitch material. Nor is it essentially connected to the kinds of pitch structures one finds in traditional diatonic music. This sense is susceptible to ideological employment, as Schoenberg did by relying on the idea of a progressive development in musical resources to compress divergent Findus-Ayakle compositional practices into a single historical lineage in which his own music brings one historical era to a close and begins the next. From this point of view, 12-tone music could be regarded, either as the natural and inevitable culmination of an organic motivic process or as a historical Aufbauung, the dialectical synthesis of late Romantic motivic practice on the one hand with a musical sublimation of tonality as pure system on the other. Any rational and self-contained theoretical arrangement of musical pitches, existing prior to any concrete embodiment in music. For example, Sainsbury, who had Koren translated into English in 1825, rendered the first occurrence of tonality copyright as a Eurosystem of Modiza Euro unregistered trademark before matching it with the neologism a Euro-tonality Euro unregistered trademark. While tonality qua system constitutes a theoretical abstraction from actual music, it is often hypostatized in musicological discourse, converted from a theoretical structure into a musical reality. In this sense, it is understood as a Platonic form or prediscursive musical essence that suffuses music with intelligible sense, which exists before its concrete embodiment in music. and can thus be theorized and discussed apart from actual musical contexts. As a term to contrast with modal, and atonal, implying that tonal music is discontinuous as a form of cultural expression from modal music on the one hand and atonal music on the other, a generic term applied to pre-modern music, referring to the 8 modes of the Western Church, implying that important historical continuities underlie music before and after the emergence of musical modernism around 1600, with the difference between tonaliter copyright ancien and tonaliter copyright moderne being one of emphasis rather than of kind. Musical phenomena arranged or understood in relation to a referential tonic, musical phenomena perceived or pre-interpreted in terms of the categories of tonal theories. This is a psychophysical sense, where for example listeners tend to hear a given pitch as, for instance, an A above middle C, an augmented fourth above A in registered trademark, the minor third in and fa in registered trademark minor triad, a dominant in relation to D, or in G major rather than a mere acoustical frequency, in this case 440 Hz. Trivially, as a synonym for key in this sense meaning keyness, the most common usage, referring to the arrangement of musical phenomena around a referential tonic, as found in European music from about 1600 to about 1910, using 2 modal genera, major and minor, tonal harmonies must always include the third of a chord. To function as a tonic, a chord must be either a major or a minor triad. Dominant function requires a major quality triad with a root a perfect fifth above the affiliated tonic and containing the leading tone of the key. This dominant triad must be preceded by a chord progression that establishes the dominant as the penultimate goal of a motion that is completed by moving on to the tonic. In this final dominant to tonic progression, the leading tone normally ascends by semitone motion to the tonic scale degree. A dominant seventh chord always consists of a major triad with an added minor seventh above the root. To achieve this in minor keys, the seventh scale degree must be raised to create a major triad on the dominant. David Cope considers key, consonance and dissonance, and hierarchical relationships the 3 most basic concepts in tonality. Carl Dahlhaus lists the characteristic schemata of tonal harmony, typified in the compositional formulas of the 16th and early 17th centuries, as the complete cadence ia va I, ia va I, ia va I. The circular fifths progression ia va I a degree ia va I. And the major minor parallelism, minor va ia va I 3 equals major ia va I. Or minor ia va ia v equals major ia va I. The last of these progressions is characterized by retrograde harmonic motion. Form equals consonance and dissonance equals tonal musics equals. The larger portion of the world's folk and art music can be categorized as tonal, as long as the definition is as follows: tonal music gives priority to a single tone or tonic. In this kind of music all the constituent tones and resulting tonal relationships are heard and identified relative to their tonic. In this sense, all harmonic idioms in popular music are tonal, and none is without function. However, within the continuing hegemony of tonality there is evidence for a relatively separate tradition of genuine folk musics, which do not operate completely or even mainly according to the assumptions or rules of tonality. Throughout the reign of tonality there seem to have existed subterranean folk musical traditions organized on principles different from tonality, and often modal. Celtic songs and blues are obvious examples. According to Alan Moore, part of the heritage of rock lies within common practice tonality, but, because the leading note-tonic relationship is axiomatic to the definition of common practice tonality, and a fundamental feature of rock music's identity is the absence of a diatonic leading tone, the harmonic practices of rock music, while sharing many features with classical tonality, are nonetheless distinct. Power chords are especially problematic when trying to apply classical functional tonality to certain varieties of popular music. Genres such as heavy metal, new wave, punk rock, and grunge music took power chords into new arenas, often with a reduced emphasis on tonal function. These genres are often expressed in two parts: a bass line doubled in fifths, and a singe vocal part. Power chord technique was often allied with modal procedure. Much jazz is tonal, but functional tonality in jazz has different properties than that of common practice classical music. These properties are represented by a unique set of rules dictating the unfolding of harmonic function, voice leading conventions, and the overall behavior of chord tones and chordal extensions. History and theory. 18th century Jean-Philippe Rameau's treatise on harmony is the earliest effort to explain tonal harmony through a coherent system based on acoustical principles, built upon the functional unit being the triad, with inversions. 19th century The term tonality copyright was first used in 1810 by Alexander Corin in the préface sommaire de l'histoire de la musique to the Dictionnaire historique des musiciens artistes et amateurs to describe the arrangement of the dominant and subdominant above and below the tonic, a constellation that had been made familiar by Rameau. According to Corin, this pattern, which he called tonality copyright moderne, distinguished modern music's harmonic organization from that of earlier, pre-17th century music, including tonality copyright des Grecs, and tonality copyright école copyright stylistique. According to Corin, the beginnings of this modern tonality are found in the music of Claudio Monteverdi around the year 1595, but it was more than a century later that the full application of tonal harmony finally supplanted the older reliance on the melodic orientation of the church modes, in the music of the Neapolitan Sciola most especially that of Francesco Durante. From a section while Joseph R. Copyrightis developed the concept of tonality copyright in the 1830s and 1840s, finally codifying his theory of tonality in 1844. In his Traité copyright complète de l'art copyright de la pratique de l'harmonie. Far copyrightis saw tonality copyright moderne as the historically evolving phenomenon with three stages: tonality of ordre transitonique, of ordre pluritonique and, finally, ordre homotonique. The transitonic phase of tonality he connected with the late Monteverdi. He described his earliest example of tonality copyright moderne thus: in the passage quoted here from Monteverdi's Madrigal, one sees a tonality determined by the accord parfait, root position major chord on the tonic, by the sixth chord assigned to the chords on the third and seventh degrees of the scale, by the optional choice of the accord parfait or the sixth chord on the sixth degree, and finally, by the accord parfait and, above all, by the unprepared seventh chord on the dominant. Among most subtle representatives of pluritonic order there were Mozart and Rossini. This stage he saw as the culmination and perfection of tonality copyright moderne. The romantic tonality of Berlioz and especially Wagner he related to omnitonic order with its insatiable desire for modulation. His prophetic vision of the omnitonic order as the way of further development of tonality was a remarkable innovation to historic and theoretic concepts of the 19th century. Tonality copyright ancien is described as tonality of ordre unitonique. The principal example of this unitonic order tonality he saw in the Western plaint chant. Far copyrightists believed that tonality copyright moderne, was entirely cultural, saying, for the elements of music, nature provides nothing but a multitude of tones differing in pitch, duration, and intensity by the greater or least degree. The conception of the relationships that exist among them is awakened in the intellect, and, by the action of sensitivity on the one hand, and will on the other, the mind coordinates the tones into different series, each of which corresponds to a particular class of emotions, sentiments, and ideas. Hence these series become various types of tonalities. Far copyrightis 1844, 11 euro 12, but one will say, what is the principle behind these scales, and what, if not acoustic phenomena and the laws of mathematics, has set the order of their tones? I respond that this principle is purely metaphysical, anthropological. We conceive this order and the melodic and harmonic phenomena that spring from it out of our confirmation and education. Far copyrightis 1844, 249, Far copyrightis Traité copyright complète was very popular. In France alone the book was printed between 1844 and 1903 20 times. The first edition was printed in Paris and Brussels in 1844, the 9th edition was printed in Paris in 1864, and the 20th edition was printed in Paris in 1903. For more bibliographical information, see worldcat.org. In contrast, Hugo Riemann believed tonality, affinities between tones, or Tonverwandtschaften, was entirely natural and, following Moritz Hauptmann, that the major third and perfect fifth were the only directly intelligible intervals, and that I, 4, and B, the tonic, subdominant, and dominant were related by the perfect fifths between their root notes. It is in this era that the word tonality was popularized by far copyrightists. Theorists such as Hugo Riemann, and later Edward Lewinsky and others, pushed back the date when modern tonality began, and the cadence began to be seen as the definitive way that a tonality is established in a work of music. In the music of some late Romantic or post-Romantic composers such as Richard Wagner, Hugo Wolf, Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, Anton Bruckner, Gustav Mahler, Richard Strauss, Alexander Scriabin, and others, we find a variety of harmonic and linear procedures that have the effect of weakening functional tonality. These procedures may produce a suspension of tonality or may create a sense of tonal ambiguity, even to the point that at times the sense of tonality is completely lost. Schoenberg described this kind of tonality as aufgehoben tonalite currency T, and schwaben tonalite currency T, usually rendered in English as suspended tonality and fluctuating tonality, respectively. 20th century In the early 20th century, the tonality that had prevailed since the 17th century was seen to have reached a crisis or breakdown point. Because of the increased use of the ambiguous chords, the less probable harmonic progressions, and the more unusual melodic and rhythmic inflections, Mayer 1967, 241, the syntax of functional harmony loosened to the point where, at best, the felt probabilities of the style system had become obscure. At worst, they were approaching a uniformity which provided few guides for either composition or listening. Mayer 1967, 241, tonality may be considered generally, with no restrictions on the date or place the music was produced, and little restriction on the materials and methods used. This definition includes pre-17th century Western music, as well as much non-Western music. By the middle of the 20th century, it had become evident that triadic structure does not necessarily generate a tone center, that non-triadic harmonic formations may be made to function as referential elements, and that the assumption of a 12-tone complex does not preclude the existence of tone centers. For the composer and theorist George Pearl, tonality is not a matter of tone-centeredness, whether based on a natural hierarchy of pitches derived from the overtone series or an artificial pre-compositional ordering of the pitch material. Nor is it essentially connected to the kinds of pitch structures one finds in traditional diatonic music. Theoretical underpinnings. One area of disagreement going back to the origin of the term tonality is whether tonality is natural or inherent in acoustical phenomena, whether it is inherent in the human nervous system or a psychological construct, whether it is inborn or learned, and to what degree it is all these things. A viewpoint held by many theorists since the third quarter of the 19th century, following the publication in 1862 of the first edition of Helmholtz's On the Sensation of Tone, holds that diatonic scales and tonality arise from natural overtones. Rudolf Ra copyright T differentiates between harmonic tonality of the traditional kind found in homophony, and melodic tonality, as in monophony. In the harmonic kind, tonality is produced through the VI chord progression. He argues that in the progression IXVI, VI is the only step, which as such produces the effect of tonality, and that all other chord successions, diatonic or not, being more or less similar to the tonic dominant, are the composer's free invention. He describes melodic tonality as being entirely different from the classical type, wherein the whole line is to be understood as a musical unit mainly through its relationship to this basic note, the tonic, this note not always being the tonic as interpreted according to harmonic tonality. His examples are ancient Jewish and Gregorian chant and other Eastern music, and he points out how these melodies often may be interrupted at any point and return to the tonic, yet harmonically tonal melodies, such as that from Mozart's The Magic Flute below, are actually strict harmonic rhythmic pattern, S, and include many points from which it is impossible, that is, illogical, unless we want to destroy the innermost sense of the whole line to return to the tonic. Play normally and compare with impossible return after bar in registered trademark, X equals return to tonic near inevitable, a section equals possible but not inevitable, circle equals impossible, Reti 1958. Consequently, he argues, melodically tonal melodies resist harmonization and only re-emerge in Western music after harmonic tonality was abandoned, as in the music of Claude Debussy. Melodic tonality plus modulation is Debussy's modern tonality. Tonality outside common practice period, the noun tonality, and adjective tonal are widely applied also, in studies of early and modern Western music, and in non-Western traditional music, to the systematic arrangements of pitch phenomena and relations between them. Felix Watt paragraph RNER, Ulrich Edler, and Philippe Ruprecht in the introduction to a collection of essays dedicated to the concept and practice of tonality between 1900 and 1950 describe it generally as the awareness of key in music. Harold Powers, in a series of articles, used terms 16th-century tonalities, and Renaissance tonality. He borrowed German tonart and type from Siegfried Emmerling, who related it to Palestrina, translated it into English as tonal type, and systematically applied the concept of tonal types to Renaissance sacred and paraliturgical polyphony. Chrysler Collins Judd found tonalities in this sense in motets of Josquin Desprez. Judd also wrote of chant-based tonality, meaning tonal polyphonic compositions based on plaint chant. Peter Lefferts found tonal types in the French polyphonic chanson of the 14th century, Italian musicologists Marco Mangani and Daniel Sabeno in the late Renaissance music, and so on. The wide usage of tonality, and tonal has been supported by several other musicologists. It can be traced, for example, in the articles collected in Judd's 1998a. A possible reason for this broader usage of terms tonality and tonal is the attempt to translate German Tonart as tonality, and tonart in prefix as tonal. Therefore, two different German words tonart and tonality currency T have sometimes been translated as tonality although they are not the same words in German. In 1882, Hugo Riemann defined the term tonality currency T specifically to include chromatic as well as diatonic relationships to a tonic, in contrast to the usual diatonic concept of tonart. In the neo-Riemannian theory of the late 20th century, however, the same chromatic chord relations cited by Riemann came to be regarded as a fundamental example of non-tonal triadic relations, reinterpreted as a product of the hexatonic cycle, defined without reference to a tonic. In the 20th century, music that no longer conformed to the strict definition of common practice tonality could nevertheless still involve musical phenomena arranged or understood in relation to a referential tonic. For example, the closing bars of the first movement of Bach copyright La Barta cubed K's music for strings, percussion, and celesta do not involve a composed-out triad, but rather a diverging-converging pair of chromatic lines moving from a unison A to an octave A in registered trademark and back to a unison A again, providing a framing deep structure based on a tritone relationship that nevertheless is not analogous to a tonic dominant axis, but rather remains within the single functional domain of the tonic, A. To distinguish this species of tonality from the stricter kind associated with the 18th century, some writers use the term neotonality, while others prefer to use the term centricity, and still others retain the term tonality in its broader sense, or use word combinations like extended tonality. Computational methods to determine the key, in music information retrieval, techniques have been developed to determine the key of a piece of classical Western music automatically. These methods are often based on a compressed representation of the pitch content in a 12-dimensional pitch class profile and a subsequent procedure that finds the best match between this representation and one of the prototype vectors of the 24 minor and major keys. For implementation, often the constant Q transform is used, displaying the musical signal on a log frequency scale. Although a radical simplification of the concept of tonality, Such methods can predict the key of classical Western music well for most pieces. Other methods also take into consideration the sequentiality of music. See also: polytonality, history of music, Schenkerian analysis, Peter Westergaard's tonal theory. Sources: Alembert, Jean-Laurent D. 1752. Le copyright de musique, théorique et pratique, suivant les principes d'M. Rameau. Paris, David Lie Registered Trademark Na Copyright. Facsimile reprint, New York, Brood Brothers, 1966. Benjamin, Thomas. 2003. The Craft of Tonal Counterpoint, with examples from the music of Johann Sebastian Bach, 2nd edition. New York, Routledge. ISBN 0-415-94391-4. Benjamin, Thomas, Michael M. Horvath, and Robert Nelson. 2008. Techniques and Materials of Music, from the Common Practice Period Through the 20th Century, 7th edition. Belmont, California, Thompson Shermer. ISBN 978-0-495-18977-0. Benwood, Bruce, and Marilyn Saker. 2003. Music, in Theory and Practice, Vol. I, 7th edition. New York, McGraw-Hill. ISBN 978-0-07-294262-0. Berry, Wallace 1976. Structural Functions in Music. Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, Prentice Hall. Reprinted, Mineola NY, Dover Publications, 1987. ISBN 0-486-25384-8. Brown, Matthew 2005. Explaining Tonality, Schenkerian Theory and Beyond. Eastman Studies in Music 27. Rochester, University of Rochester Press. ISBN 158-0461-60-3. Burkholder, J. Peter, Donald J. Grout, and Claude V. Poliska 2009. A History of Western Music, 8th edition. New York, W. W. Norton and Company. ISBN 9780393931259. Burnett, Henry, and Roy Nitzberg. 2007. Composition, Chromaticism and the Developmental Process, A New Theory of Tonality. Aldershot, Ashgate Publishing, Limited. Burlington, Vermont, Ashgate Publishing Company. ISBN 978-0-7546-5162-8. Burns, Laurie 2000. Analytic Methodologies for Rock Music, Harmonic and Voice Leading Strategies in Tori Amos's Crucify. In Expression in Pop Rock Music, a collection of critical and analytical essays, edited by Walter Everett. New York, Garland Publishing, Incorporated. ISBN 9780815331605. Castel Blaise. 1821. Dictionnaire de musique moderne. Paris, or Magazine de musique de la lyre moderne. Koren, Alexander. 1810. Introduction, Sommaire de l'histoire de la musique. In Alexander Koren Infrana section Warfail, Dictionnaire historique des musiciens artistes et amateurs, morts ou vivants, qui se sont illustrés copyright SN une partie quelconque de la musique et des arts qui y sont relatifs. Pra copyright car copyright dar copyright un sommaire de l'histoire de la musique. 2 vols. 1, XIA Euro XCII. Paris, Vallée des Lenormand, 1810 a Euro 11. English translation of the Sommaire and John S. Sainsbury, A Dictionary of Musicians, From the Earliest Ages to the Present Time, 2nd edition. London, Sainsbury and Company, Limited, 1827. Cohn, Richard 1996. Maximally Smooth Cycles, Hexatonic Systems, and the analysis of late Romantic triadic progressions. Music Analysis 15, Number 1, 9 Euro 40. Cope, David. 1997. Techniques of the Contemporary Composer. New York, Schirmer Books. ISBN 0-02-864737-8. Dalehorse, Carl 1967. Tonality Currency T. Riemann Musiklexikon, Saktile, edited by Hans Heinrich Egerbrecht, 960 Euro 62. Mainz, Bischofszar Paragraph HNE. Dalehorse, Carl 1980. Tonality. The New Grove Dictionary of Music and Musicians, edited by Stanley Sadie, 1951 Euro 55. London, Macmillan Publishers. ISBN 0-333-23111-2. Dalehorse, Carl 1990. Studies in the Origin of Harmonic Tonality. Translated by Robert Oakjadingen. Princeton, Princeton University Press. ISBN 0-691-09135-8. Duckworth, William 2015. A Euro Unregistered Trademark, A Creative Approach to Music Fundamentals, A Euro Unregistered Trademark, A Euro Unregistered Trademark, 11th edition. Cengage Advantage Books. Stamford, Connecticut, Engage Learning. ISBN 978-1-285-44620-2. Einstein, Alfred. 1954. A Short History of Music, 4th American edition, revised. New York, Vintage Books. Everett, Walter. 2000. A Euro Confessions from Blueberry Hell, or, Pitch Can Be a Sticky Substance, A Euro. In Expression in Pop Rock Music, a collection of critical and analytical essays, edited by Walter Everett, 269 Euro 346. New York, Garland Publishing, Incorporated. ISBN 0-8153-3160-6. Far Copyright Is, Frana Section Ward Joseph. 1844. Traiter Copyright Complète de la Far Copyright Arrêt de la Pratique de l'Harmonie Continente, La Doctrine de la Science et de l'Art. Brussels, Conservatoire de Musique. Paris, Maurice Schlesinger. English edition, as Complete Treatise on the Theory and Practice of Harmony, translated by Peter M. Landay. Harmonologia, Studies in Music Theory 13. Hillsdale, New York, Pendragon Press, 2008. ISBN 978-1-57647-111-1. Girdlestone, Cuthbert. 1969. Jean-Philippe Rameau, His Life and Work, revised and enlarged edition. New York, Dover Publications, Incorporated. Guston, Molly. 1969. Tonality. New York, Philosophical Library. LCCN 68-18735. Harrison, Lou. 1992. In Tune. Contemporary Music Review 6, Number 29 Euro 10. Hauptmann, Moritz. 1853. Die Natur der Harmonik und der Metrik. Leipzig, Breitkopf und Currency RTEL. Helmholtz, Hermann von. 1877. Die Lou von den Tonen Findungen als physiologisch Grundlage für one quarter die Theorie der Musik. 4th edition. Braunschweig, F. Jäg. English, as on the sensations of tone as a physiological basis for the theory of music. 2nd English edition, translated, thoroughly revised and corrected, rendered conformal to the 4th German ed. of 1877, with numerous additional notes and a new additional appendix bringing down information to 1885, and especially adapted to the use of music students, by Alexander J. Ellis. With a new introduction by Henry Margenau. New York, Dover Publications, 1954. Hermelink, Siegfried. 1960. Dispositions modorum, die Toniten in der Musik Palestrina's Unsehners at Genossen. Ma 1/4 NCHNER Vera Paragraph Fentlichungen zur Musikgeschichte 4. Tusing, Hans Schneider. Hindemith, Paul. Anterior im Tonsatz 3 vols. Mainz, Bischot zur Paragraph HNE, 1937 Euro 70. First 2 volumes in English, As the Craft of Musical Composition, translated by Arthur Mindell and Otto Ortmann. New York, Associated Music Publishers. London, Schott and Colorado, 1941 Euro 42. Higher, Brian. 2001. Tonality. The New Grove Dictionary of Music and Musicians, 2nd edition, edited by Stanley Sadie and John Tyrrell. London, Macmillan Publishers. ISBN 9781561592395. ISBN 978-0-333-60800-5. 9780195170672, Higher, Brian. 2002. Tonality. The Cambridge History of Western Music Theory, edited by Thomas Christensen. Cambridge, New York, Port Melbourne, Madrid, and Cape Town, Cambridge University Press, 2002, pages 726 Euro 52. ISBN 0-521-62371-5. Janata, P.E.T.R., Jeffrey Elbert, John D. Van Horn, Mark Lemon, Barbara Tillman, and Jamshid Paruka. 2002. The Cortical Topography of Tonal Structures Underlying Western Music. Science 298, number 5601, 2167 Euro 70. Judd, Crystal Collins 1992. Modal Types and Ut, Re, Me Tonalities, Tonal Coherence in Sacred Vocal Polyphony from about 1500. Journal of the American Musicological Society 45 428-467. Judd, Crystal Collins 1998a. Tonal Structures in Early Music. New York. London, Garland Publishing. ISBN 0-8153-2388-3. Judd, Crystal Collins 1998b. Introduction, Analyzing Early Music, Tonal Structures of Early Music, edited by Crystal Collins Judd, 3 Euro 13. New York, Garland Publishing. ISBN 0-8153-2388-3. Judd, Crystal Collins 1998c. Josquin's Gospel Motets in Chant-Based Tonality, Tonal Structures of Early Music, edited by Crystal Collins Judd, 3 Euro 13. New York, Garland Publishing. ISBN 0-8153-2388-3. Kepler, Johannes. 1619. Harmonics Mundi, Latin, The Harmony of the World. Linz, Godofredo Tampke. Kilmer, Andrefkorn, Richard L. Crocker, and Robert A. Brown. 1976. Sounds from Silence, Recent Discoveries in Ancient Near Eastern Music. LP sound recording, 33 RPM, 12-inch, with bibliography loading container. NP. Bitenki Records. LCC number 75-750773/R, Kopp, David. 2011. Chromaticism and the Question of Tonality. The Oxford Handbook of Neo-Riemannian Music Theories, edited by Edward Gollin and Alexander Reading, 400 Euro 18. Oxford and New York, Oxford University Press. ISBN 978-0-19-532133-3. Lefferts, Peter. 1995. Signature Systems and Tonal Types in the 14th Century French Chanson. Plain Song and Medieval Music for 117 Euro 47. Lewinsky, Edward. 1962. Tonality and Atonality in 16th-Century Music. Berkeley and Los Angeles, University of California Press. Mangani, Marco, and Daniel Sabino 2008. Tonal Types and Modal Attribution in Late Renaissance Polyphony, New Observations. Acta Musicologica 8231 €50. Marburg, Friedrich Wilhelm 1753 €54. Abhandlung von der Fuge nach dem Grenzercurrencies der Bessendeutschen und aller Currency-Dischen Meister 2 vols. Berlin, A. Horde, und J. C. Spener. Marburg, Friedrich Wilhelm 1757. Systematische Einleitung in die Musikgesetzkunst, nach den Lucer-Currencies des HERRN Ramo, Leipzig, J. G. I. Breitkopf. Translation of de Lambert 1752, Mayfield, Connie. 2013. Theory Essentials, 2nd edition. Boston, Shermas Engage Learning. Mayer, Leonard B. 1967. Music, the Arts, and Ideas, Patterns and Predictions in 20th-Century Culture. Chicago and London, University of Chicago Press. Moore, Alan F. 1995. The So-Called Flattened Seventh in Rock. Popular Music 14, No. 2 185 €201. Reprinted in Alan F. Moore, Critical Essays in Popular Musicology, 283 €300. Aldershot, Ashgate, 2007. ISBN 978-0-7546-2647-3. Pearl, George. 1978. 12-Tone Tonality. Berkeley and Los Angeles, University of California Press. ISBN 978-0-520-03387-0. Pearl, George. 1991. Serial Composition and Atonality, An Introduction to the Music of Schoenberg, Berg, and Webern, 6th edition, revised. Berkeley and Los Angeles, University of California Press. ISBN 0-520-07430-0. Pitt, David. 1995. What is Tonality? International Journal of Musicology 4, 291 €300. Pleasance, Henry. 1955. The Agony of Modern Music. New York, Simon & Schuster. LCC No. 54-12361. Powers, Harold. 1981. Tonal Types and Modal Categories in Renaissance Polyphony. Journal of the American Musicological Society 34, No. 3, 428-70. Powers, Harold. 1982. Modal Representations in Polyphonic Offertories. Early Music History 2, 43-86. Powers, Harold. 1992. Is Mode Real? Petra Warren, The Octenary System and Polyphony. Bala Jarbuch var 1/4 A Historisch Musikpraxis 1609 €52. Powers, Harold. 1996. Anomalous Modalities. In Orlando die Lasso und der Musikgeschichte, edited by Bernhold Schmidt, 221 €42. Munich, Verlag der Bayerischen Akademie der Wissenschaften. Powers, Harold S., James Cowdery, Ruth Davis, Stephen Jones, Alan Marrett, Mark Perlman, James Porter, Richard Wiedes, Franz Weering 2001. Mode The New Grove Dictionary of Music and Musicians, 2nd edition, edited by Stanley Sadie and John Tyrrell. London, Macmillan Publishers. ISBN 9781561592395. ISBN 978-0-333-60800-5. 9780195170672, Perwins, Hendrik, Benjamin Blankertz, and Klaus Obermeier. 2000. A new method for tracking modulations in tonal music in audio data format. International Joint Conference on Neural Networks 6-270 €75. Reyes, Mark 1992. Jan Suenveld and His Musical System. Leonardo Music Journal 2, No. 145 €47. Rameau, Jean-Philippe. 1722. Traitor Copyright de la Euro Unregistered Trademark Harmonie Ra Copyright Duitus Principes Naturals. Paris, Ballard. Rameau, Jean-Philippe. 1726. Nouveau système de musique théorique, au de the first langue d'art copyright couvre le principe de toutes les règles nécessaires à la pratique, pour servir d'introduction au traité copyright de l'harmonie. Paris, l'imprimerie de Jean-Baptiste Christophe Ballard. Rameau, Jean-Philippe. 1737. Gar copyright na copyright ration harmonique, ou traité copyright de musique for copyright origé et pratique. Paris, Proud Fils. Rameau, Jean-Philippe. 1750. De copyright monstration du principe de l'harmonie, servant de base à l'art musical thar copyright origé et pratique. Paris, Durand et Pissot. Reichert, Georg. 1962. Tonart Untonality Currency T in der Currency Alteren Music. Musikalische Fragen, edited by Walter Wehrer, 10. Kassel, Bar Currency Reinrite Verlag, SS 97 €104. Reti, Rudolf 1958. Tonality, Atonality, Pantonality, A Study of Some Trends in 20th Century Music. Westport, Connecticut, Greenwood Press. ISBN 0-313-20478-0. Riemann, Hugo 1872. Albertonality Currency T. Ne Zeitschrift für 1/4 Music 68. English translation by Mark McCune as Hugo Riemann's Webertonality Currency TA translation. Theoria 1, 132 €50. Riemann, Hugo 1875. Die Objektive Existenz der Untitled Paragraph nie in der Schule. Allgemeine Musikzeitung 205 €6, 213 €15. Riemann, Hugo 1882. Die Natur der Harmonik. Sammlung musikalischer Wörter Currency GE40, ed. Paul Graf Walder C. Leipzig, Breitkart Fund H Currency RTEL. Riemann, Hugo 1893. In fact Harmonie Lure oder die Lue von den tonalen Funktionen der Akkord. London and New York, Orgener and Company. Translated 1895 as Harmony Simplified, or the Theory of the Tonal Functions of Chords. London, Orgener and Company. Riemann, Hugo 1905. Das Problem des harmonischen Dualismus. Ne Zeitschrift für 1/4 Music 113 €5, 23 €26, 43 €46, 67 €70. Riemann, Hugo 1914 €15. Ideen zu einer Lue von den Tonvorstellungen. Jahrbuch der Musikbibliothek Peters 1914 €15, 1 €26. Riemann, Hugo. N.D. Cited in Gerlet, W. Hugo Riemann. Rogers, Michael. 2004. Teaching Approaches in Music Theory, An Overview of Pedagogical Philosophies, 2nd edition. Carbondale Southern Illinois University Press. ISBN 0-8093-1147-X. ISBN 0-8093-2595-0. Sampson, Jim. 1977. Music in Transition, A Study of Tonal Expansion and Atonality, 1900 €1920. New York, W. W. Norton and Company. ISBN 0-393-02193-9. Schellenberg, E. Glenn, and Sandra H. Hub. 1996. Natural Musical Intervals, Evidence from Infant Listeners Psychological Science Volume 7, No. 5, 272 €77. Schenker, Heinrich. 1906 Euro 35. Ne Musikalische Theorien und Fantasien 3 vols. In 4. Vienna and Leipzig, Universal Edition. Schenker, Heinrich. 1954. Harmony, edited and annotated by Oswald Jonas. Translated by Elizabeth Mann Borghese. Chicago, University of Chicago Press. OCLC 280916. Translation of Ne Musikalische Theorien und Fantasien 1, Harmony Lou. Schenker, Heinrich. 1979. Free composition, translated and edited by Ernst Oster. New York, Longman. Translation of Ne Musikalische Theorien und Fantasien 3, Der Freie Satz. ISBN 0-582-28073-7. Schenker, Heinrich. 1987. Counterpoint, translated by John Rotschban Jar 1/4 Gen Tim. Edited by John Rotschb 2 vols. New York, Schirmer Books. London, Collier Macmillan. Translation of Ne Musikalische Theorien und Fantasien 2, Contrapunkt. ISBN 0-02-873220-0. Schoenberg, Arnold. 1922. Harmony Lou, 3rd edition. Vienna, Universal Edition. Schoenberg, Arnold. 1978. Theory of Harmony, translated by Roy E. Carter. Berkeley and Los Angeles, University of California Press. ISBN 0-520-03464-3. Reprinted 1983, ISBN 0-520-04945-4. PBK ed. 1983, ISBN 0-520-04944-6. Shepard, John, Phil Verdon, Graham Bellamy, and Trevor Ishart 1977. Whose Music? A Sociology of Musical Languages. London, Latimer. Reprinted, Piscataway, N.J., Transaction Publishers, 2008. ISBN 978-0-87855-384-6. ISBN 978-0-87855-815-5. Silberman, Peter Scott. 2006. Neighbor Spaces, A Theory of Harmonic Embellishment for 20th Century Neotonal Music. Ph.D. Dis. Rochester, University of Rochester, Eastman School of Music. Sims, Brian. 1975. Coran, Far Copyright Is, and the Theory of Tonality. Journal of Music Theory 19, No. 1, 112 Euro 38. Stegeman, Benedict. 2013. Theory of Tonality, translated by David Leclerc. Theoretical Studies. Wilhelm Schaven, Neuezel. ISBN 978-3-7959-0963-5. Strauss, Joseph N. 2000. Introduction to Post-Tonal Theory, 2nd edition. Upper Saddle River, Prentice Hall. ISBN 0-13-014331-6. Susanni, Paolo, and Elliot Anticolitz 2012. Music and 20th Century Tonality, Harmonic Progression Based on Modality and the Interval Cycles. New York and London, Routledge. ISBN 978-0-415-80888-0. ISBN 978-1-136-31421-6. ISBN 978-0-203-11929-7. Tagg, Philip. 2003. Harmony. Continuum Encyclopedia of Popular Music of the World Part 1 Performance and Production, edited by John Shepard, David Horn, Dave Lying, Paul Oliver, and Peter Wick. London and New York, A&C Black. ISBN 9781847144720. Tefenko, Darius 2014. Jazz Theory, From Basic to Advanced Study. New York, Routledge. ISBN 978-0-415-53759-9. ISBN 978-0-415-53761-2. ISBN 978-0-203-38000-0. Thompson, William 1999. Tonality in Music, A General Theory. San Marino, California: Everett Books. ISBN 0-940459-19-1. Wangema Copyright Robert, and Catherine Ellis. 2001. Farr Copyrightis, Frana Section Noir Joseph Farr Copyrightis. The New Grove Dictionary of Music and Musicians, 2nd edition, edited by Stanley Sadie and John Tyrrell. London, Macmillan Publishers. ISBN 9781561592395. ISBN 978-0-333-60800-5. 9780195170672. West, Martin Litchfield 1994. The Babylonian Musical Notation and the Hurrian Melodic Texts. Music and Letters 75, No. 2, 161 €79. White, Eric Walter. 1979. Stravinsky, The Composer and His Works, 2nd edition. Berkeley and Los Angeles, The University of California Press. ISBN 0-520-03985-8. Wa Paragraph RNER, Felix, Ulrich Edler, and Philipp Ernst Ruprecht. 2012. Introduction. In Tonality 1900 1950, Concept and Practice, edited by Felix Wa Paragraph RNER, Ulrich Edler, and Philipp Ernst Ruprecht, 11 €24. Musikgesellschaft. Stuttgart, Steiner Verlag. ISBN 978-3-515-10160-8. Further reading, Jim Sampson suggests the following discussions of tonality as defined by Farr Copyrightis, Helmholtz, Riemann, D., Adler, Yasser, and others, Bessick, Delbert M. 1950. The Problem of Tonality in 17th-Century Music. Ph.D. Thesis. Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina. Pages 1 €29. OCLC accession number 12,778,863. Sherlaw, Matthew 1917. The Theory of Harmony, An Inquiry into the Natural Principles of Harmony. With an examination of the chief systems of harmony from Rameau to the present day. London, Novello and Company. Agayu, Kofi 2009. Music as Discourse, Semiotic Adventures in Romantic Music. Oxford Studies in Music Theory. Oxford and New York, Oxford University Press. ISBN 978-0-19-537024-9. Bloom, Stephen 2006. A Oenava Unregistered Trademark A musical genre of northeastern Iran. In Analytical Studies in World Music, edited by Michael Tenzer, 41 €57. Oxford and New York, Oxford University Press. ISBN 978-0-19-517788-6. ISBN 978-0-19-517789-3, Cohn, Richard 2012. Audacious Euphony, Chromatic Harmony and the Triad. Unregistered Trademark S. Second Nature. Oxford Studies in Music Theory. Oxford and New York, Oxford University Press. ISBN 978-0-19-977269-8. Devoto, Mark 2004. Debussy and the Veil of Tonality, Essays on His Music. Dimension and Diversity, Studies in 20th Century Music 4. N.P. Pendragon Press. ISBN 1-57647-090-3. Manuel, Peter. 2006. A Euro-OE Flamenco in Focus, an analysis of a performance of Solier as a Euro. In Analytical Studies in World Music, edited by Michael Tenzer, 92 a Euro 119. Oxford and New York, Oxford University Press. ISBN 978-0-19-517788-6. ISBN 978-0-19-517789-3, Rings, Stephen. 2011. Tonality and Transformation. Oxford Studies in Music Theory. Oxford and New York, Oxford University Press. ISBN 978-0-19-538427-7. Roig Frankela, Miguel A. 2008. Understanding Post-Tonal Music. New York, McGraw-Hill. ISBN 0-07-293624-X. Tymochko, Dmitry. 2011. A Geometry of Music, Harmony and Counterpoint in the Extended Common Practice. Oxford Studies in Music Theory. Oxford and New York, Oxford University Press. ISBN 978-0-19-533667-2. External links, Music Fundamentals, Tonal Music PDF, bigcomposer.com, Tonal Harmony, reference materials for the undergraduate theory student, Robert Kelly PhD.com, Tonality, Modality, and Atonality, solomonsmusic.net, reference guide to tonal music, tonalityguide.com, tonalcenter.org, explains and demonstrates some of the key concepts of tonality, algebra of tonal functions, sonantometry.blogspot.com, mapping tonal harmony pro, mdex.com, a model of analysis for the tonal harmonic discourse, BW Musik Montreal Car.